So I want you to imagine just staring at a totally blank piece of paper.
Okay, a blank paper.
Right. And right in the middle of it, there's just this list of 50 random numbers.
Oh, wow. Just numbers.
Yeah, just a raw column of digits, like 12, 4, 18, 2, 7, 21, and just on and on.
Sounds a bit chaotic.
It is. Now, imagine that those numbers aren't just abstract math. They actually represent a client's behaviors over the entire last month.
Right, okay.
You're holding this paper, and your supervising BCBA walks in, points to the column of numbers, and asks you, so is the intervention working?
I mean, it would be absolutely impossible to answer that accurately.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you tried, you wouldn't really be analyzing data. You would essentially be hallucinating a pattern.
Hallucinating, that's a strong word.
Well, it's true. I mean, human beings are biologically wired for pattern recognition. It's a phenomenon called apophenia.
Epiphania.
Right. We are so desperate to find meaning that we will look at a completely chaotic list of raw numbers and just will subconsciously highlight the digits that confirm what we already want to believe.
Oh, I see. If you had a great session yesterday, your brain just magically locks onto the lower numbers to prove the intervention is working.
Exactly. Making clinical decisions from raw numbers isn't just difficult, it's honestly a massive liability.
And that cognitive bias, that total vulnerability to human error, is exactly why we do not rely on raw lists of numbers in applied behavior analysis.
No, we graph the data.
Right, we graph it. But here is the critical part and kind of the entire reason we are doing this today. Simply plotting those points on a grid is really only half the battle.
It's just ink on paper at that point.
Exactly. A graph is just ink on paper unless you know how to decode the visual language it represents. The real magic, the actual science, happens when you learn to read the story that those plotted points are trying to tell you.
Which is precisely the focus of our deep dive today.
Yes, it is.
Welcome to Behavioral Intelligence con Mara Sanchez, powered by Amethyst Therapy Services. We are so thrilled to have you here as we continue our comprehensive RBT Task List series.
So excited for this one.
Today, our mission is exclusively focused on Task List Item 8.7, Identify Trends in Graphed Data.
And we've got some great sources today, right?
Oh, definitely. We are drawing from the RBT Premium Study Textbook, the Cooper text, which, is basically the gold standard for behavior analysis, and some really comprehensive mock exam materials to just completely demystify this concept.
So let's jump right in. Why are behavior analysts so utterly obsessed with graphs?
That's a fair question.
We live in an era of advanced statistical modeling. We have algorithms that can calculate p-values, standard deviations, and complex statistical significance in a fraction of a second.
Right, the math is all done for us now.
Yeah. So why do we insist on looking at visual line graphs?
Well, it's a really profound question, actually. The reliance on visual analysis goes back to the very roots of radical behaviorism. Because behavior change is a dynamic, fluid, and ongoing process, we use visual analysis because it is an incredibly conservative method for tracking change.
Conservative in what way?
What I mean by conservative is that a visual graph doesn't let you hide behind statistical noise.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, in a statistical model, you can sometimes manipulate the math to show a quote-unquote significant change, even if the real-world difference is tiny.
Oh, right, tweaking the parameters until you get the results you want.
Exactly. But on a graph, if an intervention is truly working, it should be visibly obvious to anyone looking at it. Visual analysis protects us from our own subjective feelings about how a session went.
That makes total sense. It forces us to only accept robust, meaningful behavior change.
Exactly.
I want to ground this immediately in why this matters specifically for you, the listener.
Yeah, let's bring it back to the RBTs.
Right. If you are a registered behavior technician, or if you're, studying to become one, you really need to internalize that ABA is a natural science.
It absolutely is.
It is no different than biology or physics in its demand for empirical evidence. Every single clinical decision made about a client's treatment just has to be grounded in direct, repeated observation.
And as an RBT, you are quite literally on the front lines of the science.
Yeah, you are the one in the room capturing reality and turning it into data. Your role in this process isn't just administrative, it is scientifically irreplaceable.
It really is. And when you zoom out and look at the bigger picture of client care, Identifying trends accurately is the ultimate safeguard.
How so?
Well, it prevents us from continuing ineffective, frustrating plans that aren't actually helping the client.
Right, nobody wants to be stuck doing something that doesn't work.
Exactly. And conversely, it stops us from unnecessarily modifying plans that are actually working perfectly well, even if they feel a bit slow.
Oh, that's a great point. Sometimes it just takes time.
Right.
Yeah.
So your ability to look at a graph and accurately read the trend directly protects the client from harm, from wasted time, and from unnecessary restrictions.
And think about your relationship with your supervisor, too. Your BCBA relies entirely on your objective data entry to make their clinical decisions.
They do. They are not with the client every single day.
But you are. If you spot a safety-relevant change in a trend, let's say a dangerous spike in self-injurious behavior, they expect you to recognize that visual shift and report it immediately.
You are the architect's eyes and ears on the ground.
Exactly. Plus, practically speaking, visual analysis is heavily emphasized on the RBT exam.
Heavily.
Yeah. Knowing how to read a graph is a non-negotiable fundamental requirement for your certification.
So let's start with the foundation. We need to look at the official BACB definition straight from the Cooper text, and then we are going to translate that into functional everyday language.
Perfect. Lay it on us.
The text defines trend as, quote, the overall direction taken by a data path. It is described in terms of direction increasing, decreasing, or zero trend degree, gradual or steep, and the extent of variability of data points around the trend.
Okay, let's strip the jargon out of that. First, the term data path.
Yeah, that sounds highly technical.
It does, but a data path simply refers to the straight lines that you draw to connect your data points on the graph. That's literally it.
It's just the line connecting the dots.
Right. So when the definition talks about trend, it is really just asking you a very fundamental question. Overall, taking a step back, where is this connecting line heading over a period of time?
Precisely. It is the big picture trajectory.
But I want to challenge this, because this is where I see practitioners get tripped up in the real world all the time.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's say I am working with a client on reducing tantrum behavior, right?
Okay.
For 3 weeks, we are averaging about 5 tantrums a day. Then on Tuesday, the client has a phenomenal day. 0 tantrums.
Awesome day.
Not a single one. Just looking at that one Tuesday, the line plunges straight down to 0. So is that plunge in my new trend? Does one spectacular day dictate the trend?
I am so glad you brought that up because this is such a critical distinction. The answer is absolutely not.
No.
No. A trend, by its very definition, requires a series of data points to demonstrate a reliable pattern.
Right. You can't have a pattern with one dot.
Exactly. You cannot establish a trend with a single data point, just like you wouldn't say the climate of a desert has changed just because it rained for 1 hour.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
We use trend in behavior analysis specifically to predict future measures of behavior under unchanging conditions. You simply cannot predict the future from one single isolated data point.
Right. That phenomenal Tuesday is fantastic, but until it becomes a consistent Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, it is just a data point, not a trend.
Exactly, because it could just be an outlier.
Yeah, maybe the client slept 12 hours the night before, or their favorite uncle came to visit.
If we assume that one data point is a new trend, we might prematurely fade an intervention that is still very much needed.
You need a history to see a direction. So let's break this down into a systematic process. Even for those of you who look at graphs every single day, it is crucial to return to the foundational mechanics of visual analysis.
Definitely. The best way to approach any behavioral graph is to look for the 3 dimensions.
The 3 dimensions, okay.
When a BCBA looks at a visual display of data, their eyes are scanning for 3 distinct interacting elements. The first is level.
Level.
Level refers to the average value of the data within a specific phase on the y-axis. Simply put, is the behavior happening at a generally high rate, a medium rate, or a low rate?
Right. So if a client is engaging in aggressive behavior like 50 times an hour, the level is very high on the graph. If they're engaging in it 2 times an hour, the level is low.
Exactly. The second dimension is variability.
Okay, variability.
Variability tells us how scattered, bouncy, or erratic the points are from one session to the next.
Right, like how much they jump around.
Yes. Do the data points cluster tightly together in a nice, neat line? Or are they jumping wildly from 10 to 80 to 5 to 100? High variability means low consistency.
That makes sense.
And the third dimension, which is our focal point today, is trend, the overall direction.
Now, within that third dimension of trend, There are 4 specific directions you need to be able to identify instantly, right?
Yes, 4 main directions.
The first is an accelerating trend, which is also called an increasing trend.
Right.
This is visually represented by data points that are rising higher and higher over time. The line is climbing.
And clinically, this is straightforward. It means the behavior you are measuring is increasing in frequency, duration, or whatever metric you are using.
Okay. The second is a decelerating trend, or a decreasing trend. Visually, the data points are falling lower and lower on the graph over time.
The slope is going down.
Right. Clinically, this tells us the target behavior is decreasing.
The third is a stable trend, sometimes referred to as a zero trend. Visually, the data points are roughly horizontal across the graph.
So they aren't climbing and they aren't falling.
Exactly. They're just moving straight across from left to right. Clinically, a stable trend means there is no meaningful change happening in the behavior's trajectory. It has plateaued.
And finally, the fourth is a variable trend.
Yes.
This is where the data points are highly scattered all over the place, with no discernible upward, downward, or flat trajectory.
The points are so chaotic that you cannot confidently draw a line of best fit through them.
Clinically, this means there's an inconsistent pattern, right? And the behavior is likely not under the control of the current intervention.
Exactly. It's essentially noise.
You know, audio is a tricky medium for visual concepts. Staring at an imaginary scatter plot in your mind's eye can get a bit abstract for the listener.
It really can.
So, to really lock in how level, variability, and trend work together, I like to use an analogy that gets us away from the clinic and out into the real world.
Oh, I love analogies. What is it?
Think about hiking a massive mountain range.
Okay, hiking a mountain. It is a brilliant way to conceptualize the 3 dimensions. Walk us through how you map them.
Okay, so picture yourself lacing up your boots and hitting a trail. The first dimension, level, is your altitude.
Altitude.
Okay. Where is this hike taking place? Are you starting your hike way down in a valley at sea level? Or did you drive your car up to a trailhead that is already 10,000 feet up in the clouds?
Right.
That average altitude, how high up you are on the mountain, is your level.
That's perfect.
The second dimension, variability, is the actual physical terrain of the trail beneath your boots.
The terrain itself.
Right. Is it a nicely paved, smooth, predictable path? That would be low variability.
Like a walking trail at a park.
Exactly. Or is it an incredibly rocky, jagged trail where one step you are climbing over a massive boulder and the next step you are dropping down into a deep ditch?
Oh man, that sounds exhausting.
It is. That constant erratic up and down from step to step is high variability.
And this brings us to the third dimension trend, which is the overall slope of the mountain you are currently navigating.
Right, the big picture.
If you look past the individual rocks at your feet and look at the whole mountain, are you generally climbing upward toward the summit? That is an accelerating trend. Are you on the back half of the hike, generally heading downward toward the parking lot? That is a decelerating trend.
Going down.
Or are you walking across a completely flat, sprawling plateau? That is a stable trend.
What I love about this analogy is that it proves these 3 dimensions happen simultaneously.
How do you mean?
Well, you can have a trail that is incredibly rocky and bouncy, which means high variability. But if you step back, you can still clearly see that overall you are hiking down the mountain towards your car.
Oh, absolutely.
The jagged rocks don't erase the fact that you are losing altitude. High variability does not necessarily cancel out a decelerating trend.
That is a phenomenal point. You have to be able to see the forest for the trees, or in this case, the mountain for the rocks.
Exactly.
But this analogy also perfectly illustrates the 4th trend type, right? The variable trend.
Oh, right. What does a variable mountain look like?
Well, what if the trail is so insanely chaotic, just peak after deep valley after peak, that if someone asked you, are you going up the mountain or down the mountain? You literally couldn't answer.
You just be like, I'm just surviving out here.
Exactly. You're just bouncing around randomly. That is a variable trend. And in behavior analysis, if your data path looks like that chaotic trail, it is a massive red flag.
Why is it a red flag?
Because it means whatever environment you are in is highly unpredictable. And you need to stop looking at the graph and start looking at the environment to figure out why the path is so chaotic.
That makes total sense. Let's bring this right out of the mountains and into real day-to-day applied behavior analysis. Let's walk through what these trends actually look like in different clinical settings.
And more importantly, what they mean for the client.
Right. Let's start in a clinic setting with an accelerating trend.
Okay, accelerating in a clinic.
Imagine you are teaching a young client a brand new communication skill.
Mm.
We will use manding, which, is the behavioral term for requesting items.
Right, asking for things.
You are teaching them to exchange a picture card, to ask for a preferred toy. You collect data on independent mans for 2 weeks. When you look at the graph, the data path starts low on Monday, but by the end of the second week, it is rising steadily toward the top right corner of the graph.
So you have an accelerating trend.
Exactly.
And in this specific context, the clinical meaning is highly celebratory. An accelerating trend when teaching a replacement behavior, like a communication skill or a daily living skill, means the client is acquiring the skill.
The intervention is working exactly as designed.
We want to see those numbers climb. The data is proving that the client is gaining independence.
Right. But an accelerating trend isn't always good news. Context is everything.
Oh, absolutely. Context changes everything.
Let's switch gears to a home or community setting. You are implementing a behavior intervention plan for a dangerous problem behavior with a clear onset and offset. Something like self-injurious behavior, or SIB, where the client is hitting their head against a wall.
Very serious behavior.
Over the course of a month, you diligently take frequency data. You plot your data points, and you see that the line is steadily falling. Week 1, they were at 30 instances. Week 2, they were at 20. Week 3, at 10.
You are looking at a clear, decelerating trend.
Yes. And unlike the communication example, a falling line here is exactly what we want to see.
Definitely. A decelerating trend on a graph tracking a target problem behavior means the intervention is successfully reducing the behavior. The client is engaging in less self-injury.
Which is huge.
From a clinical perspective, this is a massive win. It means the client is safer, the environment is safer, and the barriers to their learning are being dismantled.
I think this is a really good moment to pause and talk about the emotional reality for the RBT when dealing with these behaviors.
Yeah, it's not just data on a page.
It's not. When you are in the room with a client who is engaging in severe SIB or intense aggression, it can feel completely overwhelming.
It's exhausting.
If a client hits you 10 times in a session, it feels like a terrible, exhausting day. You might feel like you are failing.
But if that client hit you 30 times a session 3 weeks ago, that graph is going to show a decelerating trend.
Exactly. The graph provides objective grounding when your emotions and your exhaustion are telling you a different story.
That is an incredibly insightful observation. Human memory is highly flawed, especially under stress.
Oh, for sure.
The intensity of an aggressive episode today can easily overshadow the memory of how much worse it was a month ago. The graph doesn't have emotions. The graph doesn't feel fatigue. It just shows the trend.
Right.
It allows the RBT to look at the data and say, this is incredibly hard right now. But the decelerating trend proves we are making progress. It is vital for practitioner morale.
Absolutely vital. Okay, now let's imagine a school setting. And let's explore that tricky variable trend.
The variable trend.
You are an RBT pushing into a loud, busy general education classroom. Your objective is to track off-task behavior, maybe out-of-seat behavior, or staring at the wall during independent work time.
Very common scenario.
You look at your graph at the end of the month, and the data points are just violently scattered. One day, they are off-task 80% of the time. The very next day, they are a perfect student, off-task only 10% of the time.
Wow, that's a huge swing.
The day after that, it spikes to 60%, then drops to 5%, up, down, up, down. There's no clear direction. You can't draw a line through it.
This is your classic variable trend. And what is so fascinating here is how novice practitioners react to it.
How so?
Very often, a new RBT will look at a highly variable graph and think, the data is broken, or the intervention is a complete failure, or even, I must be taking the data wrong.
I've definitely felt that way before.
But a variable trend is not useless data. It is actually incredibly valuable data because it is screaming a very specific message to the BCBA.
What's the message?
It tells the supervisor that the behavior is not under the control of the current intervention and that there is a severe lack of environmental control. It forces the BCBA to start looking for what we call setting events.
I was hoping we would get to setting events. A variable trend is almost always the smoking gun for a hidden setting event.
Yes.
Let's explain what that is, because it is vital for understanding why a graph looks chaotic.
A setting event is essentially a broader condition or context that alters the value of a reinforcer. or makes a specific behavior more or less likely to occur in that moment.
It's like the background context.
Precisely. So if we see a wildly variable trend in that busy classroom, the BCBA isn't just going to stare at the graph in confusion. They're going to investigate the environment.
Right, they're going to play detective.
They might discover that the client's behavior only spikes to 80% on days when they didn't sleep well the night before.
So lack of sleep is the setting event.
Exactly. Or maybe the behavior plummets to 10% on days when they had a highly preferred physical education class right before math.
Or maybe the classroom is overwhelmingly noisy only on days when it rains and the whole school has indoor recess.
The variable trend is a giant flashing neon sign that says, look closer at the environment, something else is pulling the strings here.
I absolutely love that. The graph is literally talking to you. It is pointing out a mystery that needs to be solved.
It really is.
But here is the catch. The graph can only tell you the truth if you feed it the truth.
That is a very big catch.
If the data is corrupted, the trend is a lie. So we have to talk about common mistakes, because human error is the single biggest threat to the integrity of our data.
This is a critical area, and the absolute most common and arguably most dangerous mistake we see regarding trends is confusing frequency with rate.
Frequency versus rate, yes.
This is a massive trap, and it ruins graphs every single day.
Let's build a scenario to show exactly how this happens. Let's say you are tracking the frequency of a client's elopement, basically running away from the work area.
Okay.
You're using a simple clicker counter. On Monday, you have a standard 2-hour session with the client. You click your counter 10 times, so the frequency is 10.
Got it. 10 times in 2 hours.
On Tuesday, the client have a doctor's appointment, so you only see them for 30 minutes before they have to leave early.
A much shorter session.
Right. During that very short 30-minute window, you click your counter 10 times. The frequency is 10.
Okay.
On Wednesday, you have a 2-hour session again. You click your counter 10 times.
I see where this is going.
If you are an RBT who just takes the raw frequency, the count of 10, 10, 10, and plots that on a graph, you're going to draw a perfectly straight horizontal line.
It's the stable trend.
You're going to look at your supervisor and say, the data shows a perfectly stable trend.
But that stable trend is a complete mathematical illusion. It is a total lie.
Why is it a lie?
Think about the reality of what happened in that room. Engaging in elopement 10 times across a long 2-hour period is a moderate issue. But engaging in elopement 10 times in just 30 minutes.
Oh, wow.
That means the client was constantly, frantically trying to run away every 3 minutes. That is a massive, severe spike in behavior.
It's completely different context.
Exactly. If you graph raw counts across sessions of unequal lengths, you will create a false, artificially flat trend or a wildly false variable trend. You're essentially comparing apples to oranges.
So how do you fix it?
To fix this, you must calculate and graph the rate. Rate is the count of the behavior divided by the unit of time.
Let's do the math to prove it. On Monday, 10 elopements divided by 2 hours is a rate of 5 elopements per hour.
Right.
On Tuesday, 10 elopements divided by 0.5 hours, which is 30 minutes, is a rate of 20 elopements per hour.
See the difference.
On Wednesday, back to 5 elopements per hour. If you graph the rate, your points go from 5, shooting all the way up to 20, and dropping back to 5.
That perfectly flat, stable line suddenly transforms into a highly variable, alarming spike that accurately reflects the chaos of that Tuesday session.
Exactly. And that is why BCBAs are so insistent on calculating rate when session times vary. The visual analysis is only as good as the mathematics supporting it.
If you plot raw frequency during unequal observation periods, you are blinding the BCBA to the reality of the trend.
Which brings us to mistake number 2. And we need to talk about this with a lot of empathy, but also a lot of firmness, altering or backfilling data.
Oh, this is a big one.
I know exactly how this happens in the real world. You are an RBT. You are managing a client who is having a tough day. They are crying. You are managing materials. You are trying to provide reinforcement, and you simply forget to click your counter.
It happens to the best of us. We're human.
The session ends. You sit in your car, you look at your tablet, and you have blank data fields. Panic sets in.
You know your BCBA wants a full graph.
Exactly. So you think, well, it felt like about 15 times, and you type in 15 retroactively so the graph looks right and the line connects.
I understand the human psychology behind why this happens. It usually stems from fear of looking incompetent or just sheer overwhelm. But I cannot stress this enough. Doing this invalidates the data entirely.
It's really that bad.
Yes, it creates fabricated trends. Our entire science, the entire foundation of applied behavior analysis, is built on direct observation.
Why, if you didn't observe it?
If you didn't observe it and record it in the moment, it didn't happen. By guessing that it was about 15, you might accidentally turn what was actually a stable trend into an accelerating one.
Oh, man.
The BCBA looks at that false acceleration, assumes the intervention is failing, and completely overhauls a behavior plan that might have actually been working.
Just because of a guess.
Your well-intentioned guess cascades into a clinical disaster. It is always, always better to have a missing data point with a note that says, data loss due to managing crisis, than to have fabricated data on a graph.
That is so important. A missing data point is a clinical reality. A fabricated data point is data fraud.
Exactly.
And that leads perfectly into mistake number 3. Independent clinical decisions. This is the savior complex trap.
The savior complex, yeah.
Let's say I'm an experienced RBT. I'm looking at my tablet, and I see a flat, stable trend for 3 consecutive weeks on a matching skill we are trying to teach. The client is stuck at 40% accuracy.
Very frustrating for everyone.
Right. They are frustrated. I am frustrated. I look at that flat line and think, this isn't working. I know this kid. If I just switch out the token board for an edible reinforcer, or if I just increase my prompt level, I know they can succeed.
Right, you just want to help.
So I independently changed the procedure so the trend line will finally go up. Why is that such a massive mistake?
Because you have just destroyed the experimental control of the intervention. While your desire to help the client succeed is wonderful and compassionate, you must never change a procedure independently.
Why not, if it helps?
Think of it like a clinical trial for a new medication. If a nurse decides to double the dose of the medication because the patient isn't getting better fast enough, the scientists running the trial no longer have any idea if the drug works at the prescribed dose.
Wow, that makes it so clear.
In ABA, if you change the reinforcer without telling the BCBA and the trend line suddenly accelerates, the BCBA is going to look at the graph and think, wow, the original plan is finally working.
But it's not.
No. They have no idea you introduced a completely new variable. You have confounded the data.
So what should the RBT do?
The correct ethical action is to collect the accurate data, identify that the stable, flat trend indicates a lack of progress, and immediately notify your supervising BCBA so they can formally analyze the variables and modify the plan.
Because I'm not the architect of the plan. I am the sensory apparatus. I am the data gatherer.
Precisely. The BCBA has the comprehensive advanced training to look at that flat trend, analyze the functional variables across all environments, and safely modify the plan.
Going rogue, even with the absolute best of intentions, severely disrupts the therapeutic process and violates your scope of practice.
It absolutely does.
Okay, we've covered the theoretical, the practical, and the pitfalls. I want to transition into how these concepts are actually tested on the RBT exam.
Oh, this is crucial for our listeners.
We are going to explore 5 common traps or scenarios you will likely encounter. Let's discuss the concepts behind these questions so you understand why the board tests them the way they do.
Sounds good. Let's start with the foundational dimensions.
Right. A very common trap on the exam is trying to confuse you with statistical terms versus visual analysis terms. They will ask you to identify the 3 dimensions of graphed data, and they will throw in distractors like mean, median, and mode, or slope and intercept.
Right, and it is crucial to remember that while ABA is data-driven, visual analysis uses its own specific terminology.
Mean, median, and mode are just stats, right?
Exactly. Mean, median, and mode are measures of central tendency used in statistical analysis, not the visual dimensions of a time series graph. Slope and intercept are terms from linear regression in traditional statistics.
So what should they look for?
When you are looking at a behavioral graph, you are strictly looking at level, the average value on the axis trend, the overall direction, and variability, the scatter or bounce.
If you see statistical jargon on a question about visual analysis, it is almost certainly a distractor.
Almost certainly.
The second major trap candidates fall into is confusing a variable trend with a stable trend.
This happens all the time.
The exam might describe a graph where the data points are widely scattered all over the place, with no consistent upward or downward direction. A lot of candidates choose stable because they think, well, it's consistently bouncing everywhere, so the bouncing is stable.
That is a very dangerous misunderstanding. Stable does not mean consistently chaotic. Stable means horizontal, tight, and flat. It means the behavior is predictable.
Widely scattered data lacking a clear direction is the very definition of variable. It is unpredictable.
Right. If the points look like a shotgun blast on the page, it is variable. If they look like a tight string pulled horizontally, it is stable.
Let's talk about the clinical interpretation of a decelerating trend, because the exam loves to test your ability to connect the visual to the reality.
They want to know you can apply it.
Exactly. If a question states that a graphed data path for a target problem behavior is falling over time, the candidate needs to know exactly what that signifies clinically.
Yes, and this goes back to our earlier discussion about self-injurious behavior. A falling data path, a decelerating trend, literally maps a reduction in the measure of behavior over time.
The line is going down, so the behavior is going down.
If the question asks what this means for a problem behavior, the answer is that the behavior is decreasing. You always have to map the visual direction to the specific behavior being targeted.
Which brings us to the ethics and scope of practice trap. Let's say an exam question gives you a scenario where a client's progress is stalled for 3 weeks. You see a flat, stable trend on skill acquisition.
Okay, a plateau.
The question asks for your next step, and the options usually include things like change the reinforcement schedule, implement a new teaching strategy, or collect data and notify the BCBA.
We just discussed this, but it bears repeating because it is heavily tested.
Why is it tested so much?
Because it is a fundamental boundary of the profession. The board wants to ensure you know your role. RBTs report observations, BCBAs design and modify plans.
You must never choose an exam answer that has the RBT independently changing a procedure, altering a prompt hierarchy, or modifying a reinforcement schedule.
The answer is always, always to communicate the trend to the supervisor.
And the final conceptual trap involves the actual purpose of the trend line. Why do we care about the direction? The Cooper text is very specific about this. If a supervisor asks you to analyze a trend, what is the ultimate goal of that analysis?
The ultimate goal is prediction.
Prediction.
According to the source material, trend is the dimension specifically used in predicting future measures of behavior, assuming that the current environmental conditions remain unchanged.
Oh, okay.
Level only tells you the average of what has already happened. It looks backward. Variability tells you how much control you currently have. It looks at the present.
Trend points the arrow toward the future.
Exactly. It allows us to say, if we keep doing exactly what we are doing today, where will this behavior be in 2 weeks?
That predictive power is incredible. It allows us to be proactive rather than reactive.
Absolutely.
And speaking of being proactive, this leads us naturally into our ethics minute. We weave this into every deep dive because the application of these concepts is just as important as the definitions.
It's absolutely essential.
The source texts and the ethical guidelines we reviewed are incredibly explicit about data fraud. We touched on this with backfilling, but it needs to be stated clearly.
It does.
Altering, omitting, or estimating data, regardless of your intent, regardless of how stressed you were, constitutes data fraud. It is a severe violation of the BACB ethics code.
It compromises the entire foundation of our science. If the data isn't a true empirical reflection of reality, every single clinical decision built on that data is fundamentally flawed.
You are building a house on a foundation of sand.
Exactly.
And regarding scope of practice, while analyzing a trend is a shared skill, you absolutely need to know how to read the graph to do your job. Interpreting that trend to diagnose a client, counsel a family, or modify the behavior plan falls strictly outside the RBT scope of practice.
You are gathering the empirical evidence. The BCBA is the architect who modifies the blueprint.
If a parent looks at the graph over your shoulder and says, "Oh no, the trend is going up. Does my child have ADHD?" You cannot interpret that for them. You must refer them to the BCBA.
And finally, a word on confidentiality. Graphs are visual representations of a client's highly sensitive clinical progress. They contain protected health information, or PHI, under HIPAS.
Right. A graph with a client's initials on it is a medical document.
Yes.
You can't just leave a graph open on your tablet while you grab a coffee in a public waiting room, or leave your data sheets sitting on the passenger seat of your car with the windows down.
Exactly. Or discuss a client's accelerating problem behavior trend loudly with a coworker in the clinic hallway or an elevator.
Protecting the client's privacy and dignity is just as important as accurately graphing their behavior.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to tap into some supervisor insight. We have a lot of candidates and newer practitioners listening.
Yeah.
From a BCBA's perspective, when they are evaluating an RBT's skills with data and graphs, what elevates an RBT from just good to absolutely elite?
That is a great question. Elite RBTs exhibit excellent implementation.
What does that look like?
First and foremost, that means entering data immediately following observation, Not in the car after the session, not at the end of the day when memory fades, but contemporaneously.
Right in the moment.
But beyond that, elite RBTs are proactive communicators. They don't just passively enter data into an app and log off.
They speak up.
Yes. If they see a significant shift in a trend, especially an unexpected acceleration in a dangerous problem behavior, or a sudden, unexplained plateau in a skill, they report it on the same day.
They don't wait for a meeting.
Right. They say, hey, I noticed the trend for hitting has sharply accelerated over the last 3 days. I wanted to bring this to your attention immediately. They don't wait for the formal monthly review. They use visual analysis in real time.
So, conversely, what does poor implementation look like in the eyes of a supervisor? What makes a BCBA worry?
Poor implementation is the passive RBT. It is an RBT who continues to blindly run a procedure day after day, week after week, without ever zooming out to look at the graph.
Just going through the motions.
They might be collecting the data accurately, but if the problem behavior has a highly variable or violently accelerating trend, and the RBT just keeps running the plan without sounding the alarm, that is poor implementation.
What else?
Or, as we discussed at length, the RBT who tries to fix a flat trend by going rogue and altering the BCBA's plan without permission.
The savior complex.
Exactly. That tells a supervisor that the RBT either doesn't understand the scientific purpose of experimental control, or they do not respect their scope of practice. Both are major red flags.
That makes total sense. You have to be an active, analytical, communicative part of the clinical team.
Absolutely.
So how can our listeners lock all of these concepts into their long-term memory for when they are sitting under the bright lights of the exam center? Let's give them a memory hack.
We have 2 highly effective mnemonics for this.
Let's hear them.
First, to remember the 3 interacting dimensions of a visual graph, just remember that when you look at a graph, you are watching LTV, like a television, LTV.
LTV.
Level, trend, variability.
LTV, I love that. The graph is a screen showing you the client's behavior. Level, trend, variability. And what about the 4 specific directions of trend?
When you are preparing to draw your data path, just remember the acronym ADSV.
ADSV.
Always draw straight vectors. Accelerating, decelerating, stable, variable, always draw straight vectors.
That is brilliant. LTV for the dimensions and ADSV for the trends.
Exactly.
If you write those down on your scratch paper the second you sit down for the exam, you will not get tricked by statistical distractors.
Yeah, you'll be set.
Okay, we have explored a massive amount of conceptual and practical ground today. We started with the psychology of raw data and ended with the ethics of data management.
You really covered a lot.
Let's do a rapid review and synthesize the 5 critical takeaways from this deep dive.
Number 1, trend is defined as the overall direction taken by a data path on a graph over time.
Number 2, there are 4 main types of trends you must identify: accelerating going up, decelerating going down, stable flat, and variable, chaotic, and scattered.
Number 3, the primary clinical utility of identifying a trend is to predict future measures of behavior, assuming that environmental conditions remain unchanged.
Number 4, never alter, estimate, or backfill data to force a trend line to look a certain way. This is unethical data fraud that destroys the validity of the intervention.
And number 5, as an RBT, your role is to accurately collect data, identify trends, and promptly report those trends to your supervisor. You must never independently change a behavior plan based on a visual trend.
That is Task List Item 8.7, completely thoroughly demystified. We want to invite you to join us for our next deep dive as we continue to systematically conquer the entire RBT Task List series. And please, if you found this breakdown helpful, share this deep dive with a fellow RBT or a candidate who wants to truly master visual analysis.
We are all in this field together, elevating the standard of care.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with a more philosophical, scientific concept to chew on.
Okay, I love these.
We talked extensively today about how trend is used to predict future measures of behavior under unchanging conditions.
Right.
But think about the reality of what you do. The very moment you, the RBT, step into a room, pull out your clipboard or your tablet, and start actively recording data, the environment has fundamentally changed.
It's true. Your presence changes things.
Exactly. Your presence, your gaze, your clicking of the counter, it all alters the dynamic of the room.
Oh, wow. You are talking about the observer effect, reactivity.
Exactly. Reactivity is a known phenomenon where an individual alters their behavior simply because they know they are being observed.
Right.
It makes you wonder, by the simple, necessary act of observing and graphing a behavior, how much are we already shaping and influencing the future trend of that very behavior.
That is an incredible thought to end on.
It really brings us full circle, right back to that blank piece of paper with the 50 random numbers.
Yes.
Those numbers aren't just abstract math floating in a void. They represent a living, breathing human being interacting with your complex environment and interacting specifically with you.
The story the graph tells isn't just about them. It is a story that you are an active part of.
Exactly. Thank you for your immense dedication to behavioral intelligence, for your commitment to scientific rigor, and above all, for the compassionate care you provide to your clients every single day. We'll see you next time.